Hello, hello, good morning. Can you guys hear me? Was it too loud? Hey West 3D Art, Pira, how's everyone going? We are about to start. All right, I'm gonna increase it a little bit. How about now? Is it better, the sound? Testing. All right, cool. So we have sound, we have video, we are ready to go. Okay. So for today, I thought we could do something quite different from what we usually do here. I mean, still within the within the realm of testing things and try new techniques and see how we can utilize the features in ZBrush for to come up with something cool. But I thought we could do kind of like a poster template, and hopefully you know what I mean by that. But I'm just going to I think I didn't save it. Alright, just gonna do a quick mock-up here of what I think could be interesting, just to explore different techniques that we can use and create something that is kind of like functional in a way, as in you can create these 3D assets or 3D scenes and convert it into a template to showcase a poster or showcase your work in a poster format. And also, if you do a few of these ones, you can pack them into a product that you can sell, for example. So so let's say that composition would look something like that. We will have the poster right in the middle, and this is where the artwork will go, with a frame and everything. We could have a table there, right? They could be kind of like a pot with some plants, and there are a couple of bottles just to make it more interesting. An interesting lamp here, and just the background would be just the wall. But yeah, so that it might not sound as interesting, but the way that we create all of the assets, like the lamp, the plant, maybe the plant could be in like one of those fish bowls with some pebbles like that. So the way that we create these type of things, the bottles, the frame itself, the table, all of these are just opportunities to utilize different techniques, and that's the reason why I thought it could be a good idea. We'll see if it pays off. But yeah, we're gonna work on something like this, and ultimately you can take then all of these pieces, render them out, add some materials or whatever, and then in this region, oops, you can render a mask or just a kind of like a green screen, and in Photoshop you can create a smart object or an element where you can, whatever other render you do or whatever illustration you create, you can just put it in here, and it will be just a template to display kind of like in a real world the illustration or the concept that you did. But ultimately everything else would be generated in 3D. So that's the idea. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Is the chat also working? Let me check. All right, cool. Just gonna restart my custom UI. So we have the chat going. It might get a little bit annoying, so I will turn it off if we have more elements in the screen that it makes it hard to see. But it's all good, ready to go. All right, so I'm going to start, and we're going to use the C model quite a bit, so that's something that's always good to reinforce some of those actions. Let's go ahead and start with the frame. It's going to be the easiest one, I guess, apart from the wall, I think. So I'm going to start with a cube, make it a polymesh 3D. Polymesh 3D, and I'm gonna convert it into a Q-cube, so you guys won't be able to see that. Some of my elements I might have to arrange them for the ZBrush Live sessions. But if you go to the initialize palette at the bottom, is this one right here. I also have it in my custom UI. So if you click Q-cube, it's gonna convert it into this simple cube, and that's pretty much all we need to create that frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring in the gizmo, turn on symmetry just in case, just to make sure that it's symmetrical. And this is gonna be the size of the poster. So roughly something like that. It's gonna be a vertical poster, but again, you can do the same thing for a horizontal one. And let's just squish it down like so. And it's gonna be quite thick actually. This is the frame, or it would be the frame. And that's pretty much all we need. Let's move into the C modeler. I'm gonna turn off the thumbnail and the cam view. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna right click to bring in the qmesh and select polygroup all, so that we affect only the polygroup. And again, just in case, you can hold the Alt key and tag those. So Alt and click will tag those polygroups or these faces with a temporary polygroup. I'm gonna go ahead and click on inset and polygroup all. Make sure that inset region is selected so that it insets all of the selected polygroups, not just individual faces. And that's just gonna create that frame there. And I'm gonna go for a thick one like that. Okay. Now the other thing that I need, that I would want to have in this frame, is glass, so that it looks more realistic. So we can just right click on this qmesh, and I'm gonna hold Control, or click and hold Control to extract this piece. Just gonna leave it around there for the time being. We can also maybe assign a quick polygroup to only this. Just hold Control and W to assign a different polygroup. Then, oops, I think I made a mistake. Hang on. This is the problem. Sometimes using my pen, it's not very accurate. I'm gonna repeat that process. Click, hold Control to extract. There we go. Let's leave it with that polygroup, and then I'm gonna push this one back. Hang on. To something like that, maybe. There we go. All right, so now we can do what we did before. Just assign a polygroup here. Maybe mask everything. Hang on, before I mask it, let's go and give this glass some thickness. So let's push this one up a bit. All right. Let's go ahead and mask everything but the glass. Bring the gizmo center to the unmasked areas with this location icon. Push that back and maybe increase the size a tiny bit. There we go. And just to make things easier, what we can do is just separate these things. So I'm gonna split on mask point. So now we end up with two subtools. So we have the frame and we have the glass separately, and that will be easier for rendering as well. All right. Now the other thing that we can do this, just again, is super simple. We can enable dynamic subdivision just to soften things a bit, and we can enable QGrid. And I'm gonna do this from here so that you guys can see what I'm doing. Enable dynamic and QGrid. So that basically softens everything a bit, and we can play with the coverage. But I think that looks fine. All right. So that's done. The glass doesn't really need any subdivision because it's ultimately just a plane. But yeah, that's done. We can just rename this quickly. Let's call it frame. and start organizing the scene from the beginning. And glass. Cool. So we have the frame. Now let's do the perhaps let's just do the wall with a plane, just a simple plane, so that we have a reference of the composition, how we can lay out the different elements. So let's append a plane 3D, scale that up. So that's gonna be the wall. I'm gonna exaggerate it so that we have room to play with eventually at render time, but something like that should be fine. Okay. And we have a lot of geometry in this case. We don't need as much, but it could be an interesting one if we want to add a couple of variation in the surface. Like, it's not perfect, but something I might want to do is let's see, I want to bring in the C modeler. Sorry, right click on an edge, go to slide edge loop complete, so that we can slide the entire edge loop. And I'm going to push this one up a little bit, and let's go ahead and hold Control and Shift, assign a different polygroup here, right click qmesh, and I'm just going to push this one like so. Maybe it is too much, but we'll see. I'm also going to delete something that I don't need, or the polygroups that I don't need. So right click, delete this one. I don't need this one either. Don't know why. See, I have those two polygroups. I'm gonna have to undo all of that and repeat the process. And that happens because I'm using the pen sometimes. I'm just gonna use the mouse. Okay. Now we can delete this and tag this one. Tag all of these polygons that we don't really need. I mean, I guess we could leave the ones at the bottom, to be honest, but just for the sake of consistency, let's go ahead and remove everything that's not visible, or that won't be visible. I did an update with, well, the latest Windows update. Sort of like screws up my Wacom tablet, so it's always a gamble. After I do the update and I stream, it's always a gamble. So let's hope for the best. All right, so that's the wall. Let's just call it wall, and that's it. All right, so we got the kind of like the most boring ones out of the way, but they're kind of like important for what ultimately we want to do. So let's that's not a good sign. Not a good sign. It's starting to Yep, that's what I thought. Okay, so not even 15 minutes in, and my Wacom already gave me issues. So I'm gonna save this and I'm gonna restart. All right, that's annoying. Give me 2 seconds, I'll be right back. All right, we are back. So just resetted the drivers and ZBrush. Okay, so let me check the chat. Hey Rudvik, is there any way to do a bevel in just an edge, like in Maya with a similar? Yeah, you just need to select single edge. So if you select the C-modeler and right click on an edge, you can just go to bevel and click on polyloop, or sorry, edge loop partial, if that's kind of like what you want. Not sure if that's what you mean. All right, cool. So we have the three elements. Let's go ahead and do what else. I'm just trying to think about the kind of like building up in terms of complexity for the different items. I think I'm just gonna do the table. So I'm gonna append a cube. I wanna keep working on the simple ones, and then we go to the more complex afterwards. So initialize QCube. I always tend to just convert it to a QCube just because it is easy to manipulate. I'm gonna go into solo mode as well. So that's gonna be the table. It's gonna be kind of like a side table, or a narrow desk maybe, but quite thick, maybe, just to make it interesting. It's like a piece of wood, like a plank of wood. I think that would be cool. All right, so let's just leave it there. I'm not gonna place it in the composition. So in other words, I'm gonna create all the elements separately first, all within the center of the world, and that allows me to play with symmetry, radial symmetry, and that sort of stuff. And then I will take each element and place it into the composition afterwards. So I think something like that looks fine. Yeah, we'll see. All right, going to solo mode. Again, I'm gonna leave this one as it is. I'm just gonna add a couple of polyloops so that we can use dynamic subdivision a bit better. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually, let's just play with dynamic straight away, and we can just add a Q grid. So sit closer here so we can see the edges. Dynamic, and then we just enable Q grid, and we can play with the coverage. Maybe 2 Q grids. All right, perfect. That's it. That's what I'm saying. These are gonna be pretty simple objects, just cubes. But ultimately, once we put everything together, it's gonna look quite nice. Now for the legs, let's add another level of complexity and create something more interesting. Let's append a cube, and for this, what I'll do, I'm gonna work on one side, and then I'll do mirror and weld for the rest of the legs. I'm gonna turn everything off except the leg. Sorry, the cube that is gonna be the leg and the table. And this one I'm gonna place it where it should be. So it's gonna be, actually let's turn on, let's leave it as it is. I'm just gonna define the thickness of that leg. Somewhere there. All right, so this is gonna be forgot to make turn it into a Q cube. Let's do it again. Q cube. So I'm going for a thick part of the leg here at the top, and we're gonna simplify it at the bottom. This is gonna look a bit better than what currently looks. Don't worry. Okay, and then maybe shorter. We can adjust all of that later on. Okay, so that's gonna be kind of like the base of that leg. What I want to do is right click on an edge, go to collapse or delete actually, and edge loop complete. I'm gonna get rid of the ones in the middle. So a super simple cube, even simpler than the resolution 2 of QCube that we generated. And then here, what I'll do is I'm gonna mask these points, invert the mask. It's gonna be actually quite hard to see, but I'm gonna push these ones back a little bit like that, just to give it that nice angle, maybe even more than that. And now clear the mask. Let's do the same process from here, from this angle. Control, invert the mask and push it like so. We can do from the bottom so we can see what we're doing. Just try to generate this more of a square bottom. All right, so now that is a more interesting shape, but it's not great. So what I want to do actually is create kind of like an I don't know if it's iron, but not iron, just like a metal tube from the edges of this mesh. So ultimately what I just set up here is the base, or the blocking of where I'm going to place those metal bars. And I'm going to show you a really cool and simple way to produce this. I think I'm not going to need these two, so I'm just gonna, let's just, for the sake of it, duplicate it just in case. If in case what I'm going to do doesn't work, we'll go back to the other one. I'm gonna tag these two polygons in the inside of the leg. Right click and delete. Well, select delete and delete those. I'm also going to turn double on so we can see. Right, so those are the bases. I'm going to go into solo mode now. And now let's give this a polygroup, Control W. Right click, and I'm going to use the inset, and I'm going to leave the inset region off. So inset is going to take every single piece, or every single polygroup, every single polygon of the polygroup that I assign, which in this case is everything, the whole leg has the same polygroup, and it's going to take each one of these legs and it's going to inset them. So that's going to give me that edge that I need to extrude the, kind of like the bars or the metal pieces. So I'm going to, make sure that I have polygroup all, actually. We might need to add a couple of loops here. So let's just insert, come on, just so that we can have a more consistent thickness all around. So I'm just gonna add a few that we're gonna delete afterwards, but just so that we can have a more consistent shape. So hang on, this is not going to work the way that I thought it would. Okay, so let's think about it in another way. So that's why I duplicated it. I'm gonna undo that, right? What's happening is that I'm doing the inset, right? But because the size of this polygroup is definitely smaller than the one, the long one, Siri is trying to maintain a consistent bevel. So let's see if we can improve this. Actually, before I go back with another polygroup, let's do inset. Each one of those. Let's try border only. So this is ultimately what we want to achieve, but it's just creating a very thin border. So the alternative is leaving the polygroups as they are right now. Let's do center and border just so that we can see the thickness a bit better. And instead of, well, we can leave it a polygroup all. We're gonna do it in one. Yeah, it's not gonna work the way that I thought it would, because it's definitely, the difference is too much. So one thing we could do is a couple of things. Just trying to figure this out as I go. So we can bring this closer. just so that it's more consistent in the size. Then we can do what we were trying to do. Hopefully this would work better. So you'll see that the edges are kind of like more consistent all around. And then we can go back to what we had. So select or mask those edges. And I just have the duplicate that I did as a reference. And we just bring those down like so. I think I'm overcomplicating this, but hopefully it will pay off. All right, let me just fix this a bit. All right, let's see. Will these be a dino room? No, just a, I don't know. Just a way to have a mock-up for the poster that we're gonna be creating. Could be a dino room. Like the objects that I'm setting up could be arranged in any way you want. Cool. All right. So now this is the thickness is a little bit more consistent. And we can just right click, delete, polygroup all, and click on the lighter blue one, and that's just gonna create this shape, and that's ultimately what we were looking for. Actually, I'm thinking maybe the bottom and top could actually have like a full piece of metal. Let me undo that. So I'm just gonna tag the ones that I'm going to delete, these ones, and I think that's actually better. And then assign an entire polygroup to that, and then right click, qmesh, and I'm gonna click, oops, make sure polygroup all is selected. I'm gonna click and drag to produce the thickness of this. Something like that should be fine. And I have a feeling these are slightly thicker than the rest. Let's just push that. And let's do the same thing here. All right. So I'm just trying to make everything a bit more consistent. But we already have thickness that we can turn into dynamic subdivision. And we can use the Q grid. However, in this case, I think it's going to be much more convenient to just add a few extra poly loops. So let's go ahead and, where are we? Insert edge loop. There. Another way that you can actually do this instead of doing it manually is to just slice through all of these pieces, because if I just click once, I need to be very close. If I click once here, I will just add a single edge loop into this leg, and then I have to do it in the other ones. But if we select Control and Shift, holding Control and Shift, we can go ahead and select this slice curve, and that's just gonna slice it there and create another polygroup, but it's going to add that edge, right? So we can do this very quickly to add subdivisions. We can do another one here and another one there. All right, and that should give us more resolution, more polygons to generate something a bit better. Okay. We can still add one hue grid and play with the coverage. So this is slightly rounded. All right. So that's a more interesting table, and we can also use this to. I mean, you won't be able to see this, but you know, just for the sake again of consistency and try to make things look better, I'm gonna use. Pretty sure there is a bolt in here that we can use. Maybe not in that one. Yeah, let's use this bolt head, and I'm gonna right click and define the size based on the brush size. So it's gonna be the size of the current brush size. I'm gonna click and drag, hold Control, and there we go. Actually, whatever I insert into this one will have the same properties of the dynamic subdivision. So let's just leave it as it is, and then we split that. So click Control and set that up a couple of times. I think 2 will be enough to hold this, and then I'm gonna go back to my selection, hide these ones, split hidden, and there we go. So these ones, the bolts that I just added, they carry the same properties of the leg of the table. So I'm just gonna turn them off, or just turn off the Q grid, and that should do the trick. So now let's again, you won't. I just wanted to show you, but you won't be able to even see those. So I'm just gonna delete them because it's gonna be annoying to move them, but you get the idea. I'm gonna move this one down a bit, and this leg I'm just going to mirror and weld it in the x-axis, and then I'm also going to mirror and weld it on the what is it, z-axis. So here on the mirror and weld, hopefully you can see these. There's like these tiny little letters. I'm just gonna turn on the Z one, and now we have 4 legs for the table, which is great. And we can push this one higher even. All right, now I know that this wasn't the cleanest of processes to create that leg, so I'm just gonna show you maybe another way. So that's why I saved that other leg. It's going to solo mode. So what we can do is going to ZModeler, right click on the edge, go to inset multi edge loops. So that will create a consistent distribution of loops or edge loops all around. Let's assign a single polygroup, and then we can just go back and manually assign different polygroups by holding Alt and tag those. Right click, polygroup, click on those. Let's do the same thing here. You can hold the click and also press the Alt key to just change the polygroup. That's just gonna change the color. That's it. All right, and now that we have this, what we can do is right click, go to inset, which is what we've been doing. So we've been just clicking and dragging this, and of course this is going to give us this issue, unless it's something that you want, but we just want the simple legs, for example, for this table. So what we can do instead is right click and select inset region, and that's just going to inset the region just in the selected polygroup, because we also have polygroup selected. So I can just click and drag, and this will determine the thickness. So about there, right? And this is why I wanted to show you this other approach. It's similar. You can, like I said, there's many ways to achieve the same thing in ZBrush, but ZBrush will remember the settings of the last action of the C-modeler, so it will remember that thickness. So if I click on here, just one click, it will be consistent here and here. And I'll just do the same thing. Oops. Here. I'm gonna tag this polygroup. Do it again. Let me undo all that. I forgot to tag this polygroup. So right click, polygroup. Okay, now it's gonna work a little bit better. Inset. Something like that. Click. Click. I'm gonna do it with the mouse. Insert. Oh, I screwed up. Yeah. Anyway, let's do it again. Yeah. All right. And then I'm gonna right click on this one, delete, polygroup all. So I'm gonna delete all of these ones, this, and the one at the bottom. So essentially we end up with exactly the same thing. Maybe this one is even a little bit better in terms of consistent thickness. And we can assign a full polygroup, right click, qmesh, and extrude that. I'm gonna undo this because I actually want to keep this. Forgot. There. Polygroup, right click, qmesh. There we go. So that's maybe a simpler way to do it. I'm gonna delete that one just because I managed to do it in another way, and it's kind of like working for the purpose of this session. All right, so we have the table with the legs. Is definitely kind of like a narrow piece or a narrow table, which is fine. Let's go ahead and create the bowl with the pebbles and the plants, because that's a complex object, but it has, I'm going to show you some cool ways to approach this. Just let me check the chat. Hey Rui, how's it going? Are there any good ways to turn a model to a mold in ZBrush? Oh, there's so many. You can use booleans. Booleans is just, you know, the best way to go about it. It's super simple. You just take the mesh that you want to convert it into the negative part of a mold, and you can take a block like a Q-cube and then use booleans to extract that mesh that you want to convert. Probably that's one way to go about it. Okay, so let's do a quick save and let's do the bowl. So for the bowl, I'm gonna append a Z-sphere, or Z-sphere, sorry, just a sphere. Actually, this is just a polysphere, so no. Let's delete that. Append a sphere 3D. There we go. Maybe this is too much, but it's alright. We're gonna take the gizmo 3D. We're gonna flatten the bottom part for the bowl. Something there, something about there should be fine. Yep. And from the top as well. Actually, the top we don't need to, because we're gonna get rid of it, so just accept this. And let's hide whatever we're gonna get rid of. Actually, before I do that, I'm just keep thinking as I progress, like you know, in what's going to be the easiest way to demonstrate the tools. So I'm just going to duplicate that sphere first, turn the original off, and in the second one I'm gonna do what I was just saying. So I'm gonna hide, maybe not too much, maybe about there, and I'm gonna delete that. So now we have an open bowl, and I'm also going to right click qmesh polygroup all just to give this some thickness. So click and drag, not too thick. There we go. Alright, so now we have the thickness for the bowl. Pretty straightforward. We can also turn on dynamic. Perfect. And with the second one, the second sphere, right? This is the one that I'm gonna use as a base for the pebbles. So the bowl itself is done, which is this one, right? Has thickness, has the shape that we want, and it has plenty of resolution, so it looks alright. And it's gonna be just transparent glass. Now this one, I'm gonna go into transparent mode here inside ZBrush. Let me see if there's a better material for you guys to see what I'm about to do. Well, hopefully you can see there is a tiny little gap, obviously. So that's not the best way to do it. So the thickness of the original bowl, I just extruded outwards. So the other sphere that I have as a reference is kind of like in the inside of the original mesh. That's gonna make more sense once I do it. Let's bring in the Gizmo 3D, bring in the flatten, and push it from the top. Let's see. Well, this one is going to basically determine how many pebbles we're gonna have, or how filled the bowl is. So you can do this technique as well, just to add some water if you wanted to. So this mesh that I'm affecting is actually the level of the water. But in our case, I'm just gonna add some pebbles, so it's gonna add, just leave it there. Perhaps something like that, just so that it's not, that it looks a little bit thicker at the bottom. Okay, I'm also going to reduce the size slightly, and that is just so that we have enough room to add the pebbles, so that it doesn't intersect or anything like that. Alright, now you can turn this off for the time being. Alright, and then we just need to create a pebble as an insert mesh and apply it here as a nanomesh. So let's do that very quickly. We can do it in a separate tool. So that's gonna be the pebble. So it's gonna be extremely simple. You could use this in other software as using particles or whatever else, but that's what ultimately the nanomesh in ZBrush is almost for. It's kind of like a particle system in a way. All right. So here is our tiny pebble. I'm just trying to keep it very generic, as in, not make any feature indentation so that we can reproduce it somewhere else and it doesn't look that it's exactly the same thing. I'm gonna look up both clay polish passes. Okay, now let's convert this into something that we can use. So for that, I'm gonna go to the C plugin, decimation master, preprocess current, and that was easy. Let's reduce this to maybe 2%, and let's see how this looks. It's not too bad, but we can do better. Yeah, definitely. All right, so now we can create an insert mesh, create new. So now we have basically an insert brush. All right, and also once we have the inset brush, we can simply create a nanomesh brush. All right, so now we have a nanomesh brush. Let's go back to the ball, and I'm going to right click on a mesh, on a face, sorry, and I'm going to select polygroup all. So that's going to add a single pebble in all of these pieces. So hopefully it's not going to crash, because it's going to be one pebble per each one of these faces. Let's hope for the best. Let's do a quick save and then hope for the best. It shouldn't be a problem, but you know. There. All right. So now that we have that, we can start playing around with the settings of the nanomesh. So let's go to nanomesh. So the first thing I want to do is change this to a random distribution, and ZBrush is going to place randomly these pebbles all around this base mesh, and they're too tiny, so we can just increase the size. Okay, I'm gonna add a few more just by increasing the random distribution slider, and we can still play with the sizes quite a bit, but one of the things that I want to do is change the rotation and do it a bit more random. So let's increase the randomness and rotate it in all the axes. All right, so just playing with this variation, it does help, but still everything's pretty consistent in size. So we can also change the length and add variation to that length, the width and add variation to the width. So we have some pebbles that are thicker or bigger than other ones. Same thing with thickness. Okay, and I'm going to play with the offset as well and add variation to the offset. So all of this is just a matter of playing around with it. I think I want some flatter ones anyway. Let's add some random distribution, a bit more. Okay. So now that I have this, I can turn on the show placement so that we can actually see how this thing looks. And we can use the move brush. And the move brush is basically to adjust the shape a little bit and close some gaps. So ultimately what we're doing here is moving the polygons underneath, or that base mesh, that bowl. So we're not distorting any of the pebbles, which is great. We can also actually use the smooth brush and smooth things out. But one thing I want to do is definitely check how this is looking with the other piece. So you see it is intersecting. So I'm going to turn on transparency again. Oh, come on. And scale this down so that we can actually see where the pebbles are sitting. But I think it looks pretty decent to me. I mean, you can spend a bit more time working on this, just closing gaps and that sort of thing, but with this you get the idea. I just wanted to show you the technique, and then we'll move on to the next one. All right, so we have a bowl with the pebbles. There's some gaps in here, but you can, for instance, let me just show you. we can reduce. This is another technique. So let's say that you don't want to have as many pebbles here, because this one can turn into, you know, could be a normal map or something like that. So what you can do is go back to the nanomesh. I'm going to duplicate it so that we have both options. So yeah, I'm going to duplicate it. So in this one, I'm going to show placement, right? I'm going to reduce the amount of these pebbles. Something like that. I'm going to click on one to mesh, and that basically converts all the pebbles, the nanomesh pebbles or instances of nanomesh, into individual pieces. Oh, sorry. Do it again. And I'm gonna think. Yep. So Control and Shift to hide the polygroup or the base, and I'm gonna split hidden. So now we have the bowl and we have the pebbles individually. So you can take this is just as a mesh, and of course you can. There's some intersection, of course, so you can use the move topological and then just manually go around and do this. That's gonna take some time, but depending on the level of realism that you want, you might want to do this and use this as a way to cover those gaps, maybe. Alternatively, what you can do also is maybe just leave this one as it is, and then take this mesh. You can do an unwrap of this mesh as well, and apply a texture with a normal map that matches the same type of pebbles. And that way, all of these gaps, all of these areas that look, all of the green areas which are empty, they will look that have some texture, but you don't have to waste as many polygons in the pebbles. So yeah, so that's something else. Let's delete these ones. I'm not gonna use them. Okay, so we have the bowl, the pebbles. Let's do some plants. I do have a couple of textures that I can bring in to test, but let's set up the planes first. So I'm gonna go ahead and append a plane 3D. Scale that up. Okay, so this plane is going to be the fern. Or one of them, and then we can just duplicate and do more. But the technique is basically this. So we create a plane. Oh, I always forget. So let's create a Q grid again. Let's do the same thing that I just did before. All right, so that's good. That's what we need. And I'm going to use the C modular to just add a couple more of inserts. So insert something like that, just so that we have enough geometry to bend that plane, and that's going to create that fern. Maybe in the middle even. So for that, I'm going to just bevel that and assign a single polygroup. All right. So that's going to be the basis for the fern. The complexity of it is just going to be given by the texture and an alpha. I'll show you a really cool way to do it within ZBrush. So for that, I'm going to go to the texture palette and I'm going to click on import. And where are they? Now I need to find the ferns. So I have a couple just to give you options. So this one, fern 1 and fern 2. They're actually images with a black background. So if I bring this up, so this is the fern just with a black background, and ZBrush is going to interpret the black color or pure black as transparent in the alpha, or in the texture. So it's going to be kind of like an alpha. All right, so now we have those textures. We can bring them in and project them, but in order to do that, we need to have more resolution. So we either have more, we have two options really. We can create a UV and then take that into Photoshop and take the fern and or the texture and adjust it so that it fits that UVs of this map. That would be a very controlled way to do it. But like I said, I want to show you a simple but effective way to do it all within ZBrush. So we can generate that texture and the texture map and everything within ZBrush as well, but also see how it is affecting the alpha in real time. And also it's just another way to, another technique to show you that you can do that with texture or also with polypaint. You don't have to have UVs. In this case, I want to have UVs just because it's going to be easier, but you don't have to if you want to just use polypaint. So to have UVs on this guy, I'm going to go to the C plugin palette. I'm struggling with the, there we go, UV master, click on wrap. All right, so now we have UVs and it's ready to go. And the next thing would be to bring in the textures. So I'm going to click on this fern and click on this button here to add it to spotlight, and the other one as well. All right, now you see that I'm going to start with this one. I think this one would be the best. The best option. You'll see that they come like kind of like clipped. I don't want to have any of that, so let's just add a little bit of paint just so that we recover the original image, and that is just from this first. It's almost the last one. If you start from the right in the middle, go all around. This one that says paint, just add it a tiny bit more. All right, so I'm going to position these maybe a bit more. All right, somewhere there. I think that's fine. We can even just readjust the mesh itself just to conform to that area. All right, so the way that this works is we need to project that texture into the mesh. So if I just go ahead and let's actually create a new brush. Let's go to the standard, and I'm going to turn it into just a painting brush, right? So that I can paint with this. Let's bring in the spotlight. There we go. And then we can just go ahead and paint. So I'm gonna increase the spotlight radius, and that is just to be able to see what parts I'm painting. So I'm gonna click on the fourth one. So 1, 2, 3, 4 spotlight radius, and increase that, and you'll see hopefully that I'm just adding. It's like kind of like a hover over that will let you see where the texture is when you start painting. So now if I get out of a spotlight, I can still see this hover over to see where the painting or the texture is being projected, and I can just go ahead and click and start painting. So now I'm painting with polypaint into this mesh. Now of course the problem is that we don't have resolution, right? So it is painting, ZBrush is trying to paint that texture, but we don't have enough resolution to be able to describe those details. So let's go ahead and undo that. So what we need to do is add resolution to this, right? So if we start adding, let's say that you don't have a plane, that you have a curved surface, or something that is still very low res like this, but it's not a plane, and you start subdividing, you're gonna start, reducing or slightly changing the overall volume of the mesh, especially if you have a low res. So what I can do is just toggle this button. You don't see it there. So go to geometry and click on this SMT, which is subdivide smooth modifier, and that allows you to subdivide it without smoothing the low res. So I'm gonna divide this a few times actually. So I'm just keeping an eye on the active points. I want to have at least 1.5 million polygons. So now we have enough resolution to paint with polypaint and then convert into a texture. And once we have the texture, we can just simply go back to what we had in terms of resolution. Okay. So now I can go ahead and paint. Let's actually get out of this polyframe. Okay, so now this is, let me get our spotlight. Now this is a plane that we just projected that texture by simply painting on it, but it's still a plane, right? And it has a lot of resolution. So if I go down in resolution, you'll see that it's just polypaint. That's all we have is polypaint. So what's great about this is that we can turn the polypaint at the highest resolution level of the mesh into a texture. Then we can just reduce back to the lowest subdivision level or the low res mesh, but we still now the details of the texture are not going to be dependent on the polypaint because we created a texture. So let me show you how that's done. Let's go to texture map, and remember we have a UVs, so this is the other way to go about it. If you don't want to keep the low res, you can just play around with what you currently have. That's it, because it's polypaint. And you don't have to have UVs. You can arrange these and modify the way you want it. But in this case, I want to keep the low res mesh. And that's why we need to convert that polypaint into texture. So from the texture palette, now that we have polypaint at the highest resolution level, I'm going to click on New from Polypaint. And you'll see that creates this texture. Obviously, the arrangement of the UVs is not great, just because I didn't spend any time doing it. I just realized that I have some borders there that I might want to get rid of. So let me actually do that first before I create a texture. So I'm gonna go, yeah, somewhere there. So these white borders, I'm just gonna mask that, and I'm gonna use a black color just to fill those. Maybe I placed it too close to the edge and it didn't actually capture that black from the texture. All right, much better. All right, so now let's click on texture from Polypaint, and of course you can arrange this a lot better, but let's just go with it. This is the texture ready. So now that we have the texture, you'll see that by default, once we create it, it displays it as, or it's set to on the texture. Now we can go to the lowest subdivision level, and it looks exactly the same thing, because now ZBrush is using the UVs in the low res to project or to display that texture. But we did that texture from the Polypaint. Now the reason I'm explaining this is because you don't have to use a texture. You can just subdivide these multiple times and then use Polypaint to like literally manually paint a texture that maybe is more stylized, or it just is kind of like a cartoon style, and then create a texture from that. So now that I have the lowest subdivision level, I can delete higher. I don't need that. So now this is, if I turn off the texture, this is still my, we can also clean the Polypaint, so, or turn it off, doesn't really matter. So this is my plane that we originally had, but if I turn on the texture, now that single plane has that texture. So it might look like a very, long process, but once you get the hang of it, it's super easy to do, and you can just do it multiple times. So just as a quick recap, you create the mesh in a low res, then you subdivide it, bring in whatever texture you want, project it as using Polypaint, then create a texture from the Polypaint, and then go back to the lowest subdivision level. So maybe I just overcomplicated the steps, but that's essentially what it is. All right, so now in order to see these working in real time, like I mentioned, all we have to do is go to the texture palette, and you have this transparent slider and this anti-alias. So anti-alias is so that it doesn't get those weird edges all around when it clips the mask to the black area. So, and the transparent is how much you're going to clip. So just using the transparent there, you'll see I'm going to start to push this there, and then use anti-alias, and that is pretty much what it is, which is cool. Now let's bring in the bowl. Let's take that plane, and actually I'm going to duplicate that plane and just leave it as an original there. We actually should do the usual OR folder, just so we can keep track of the stuff that we can reuse later on. All right. Oh, excellent. Yeah, I think my drivers are just conflicting too much now, so I'm gonna restart ZBrush. Hopefully we don't lose too much. Give me 1 second, I'll be back. All right, not a big deal. We kept everything. So now I'm gonna take this plane and I'm gonna scale it. Something that kind of like makes sense there. Bring the bowl. So we have this fern, but it doesn't look very realistic. So what we can do is, remember this is just a plane, so we can bring in something like the bend curve. Before I do that, actually I'm gonna duplicate it a couple times, or one more time, just so we have this one to start with fresh. Bend curve. I'm gonna make sure from the red one, I need the red cone is the one that allows you to pick the axis. So right now it's in the x-axis. I'm gonna set it to the y-axis, so shooting up in the direction of the fern. And with the orange cone, I can increase the number of points. So I'm just gonna do that. Maybe 6 points is fine. I don't remember how many. We can have a bit more. Let's leave it like that. We can add later more if we want to. With that, now we can take this and start deforming the fern, because it's just a plane and the complexity is kind of like given by the texture itself. Which is pretty cool. And of course, if you take, I think it's the second one, no, the orange cone, if you click on each one of these points, you have extra controllers. So you click on the orange one, you can rotate it, which is awesome. Right? And the fewer points you have, the easier it's going to be to control it. But if you want to add more, all you have to do is, once you have this initial shape, you can increase the points and then just keep adding tweaks like that. Let's click on accept, and that's one done. We can also, actually I'm gonna simplify this, add another one, duplicate, follow the same process, bend curve, all right, so that looks all right. What we can do now, let's accept this one, let's rotate that, and I don't know if it's gonna keep the same UVs actually, so let me just duplicate these two just in case. Can't remember. Pretty sure it will, but so we have the two firms. I'm gonna merge. Yeah, no, it's not gonna keep them. So let's delete that. Okay, we'll just keep them separately anyway. If you don't want to keep them separately, what you can do is, let's say if you want to keep them all within one subtool, you can take this one, for example, and hold Control and Shift, and that will duplicate it within the same subtool. And you can still play around with, you know, rotation, size, all of that. But it's still going to be a single subtool. All right, and just to add some variation to this, you know what? I can use the move brush actually with the Aki curve, and then just this is just a plane. So I'm gonna bring in the other one. Maybe this one actually. So this is just manipulating that plane with the move brush. And also with the gizmo, Control, click and drag, just to add another one of these, maybe a smaller version of it. And we can play around with the move brush again. This is probably a process that you might want to spend a bit more time. Just want to finalize this plant, this bowl, so we can move on to the other areas. Clear that mask and turn this off. So now we have the bowl with the pebbles and everything. I'm just going to put this one there and there. Cool. So yeah, looks alright. It works for what we're trying to do here. So what I'll do now is start arranging the scene a little bit more, and then we have plenty of time for a couple more details. I think this one was kind of like one of the more complex assets that I wanted to do, to show you a couple of techniques. But we can still do maybe radial symmetry, which is pretty cool. What else can we do? Oh, maybe the lamp, just some kind of lamp, and that should be it. So I'm gonna select the pebbles, gonna create a new folder and call it bowl or plant actually, and we just put everything in there. So that's the plan, and that's gonna help us arrange things in just a second. This is gonna be, whoops, this is going to be the table. The wall is fine. The frame, let's put it into the folder. All right, so this is going to start looking a little bit more interesting than just individual pieces. Let's do a quick save, and let's create maybe some bowls or just bottles for incense or something like that. All right, so I'm going to click on append, and for that I'm going to start with a cylinder 3D. I mean, I wanted to show you a couple of ways I'm just thinking, let's do a cylinder 3D, so that we can keep it kind of like low res and a nice geometry from the beginning, or underlying geometry. All right, so this is going to be the base for the bottle. We can definitely use C-modeler and all that. I just want to show you another way to create something more interesting than just the plain one. Let's do two. Let's do the plain one and then something more interesting. So for the plain one, I guess what we have to do is go to C-modeler. No, I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna show you if we're gonna do the plain one and more controlled modeling. I'll probably want to start in a separate tool so that we have the primitive and we can control these subdivisions a lot more. So we can go to the initialize tab with the primitive, right? So this is not a mesh that we can actually affect just yet. This is a primitive, and we can determine how many subdivisions we want. So I'm going to set it to 16. Should be fine. And it's the V divide or vertical divide. We'll set it to, let's set it to 3 just to start with, right? So we're going to have 3 sort of like not planes but surfaces. So the top one is 1, the cylinder all around is 2, and the one at the bottom is the third one. So 16. Cool. I'm just gonna type it here before I forget. And then I'm gonna turn that into a polymesh 3D. Now the reason I like to keep track of the amount of subdivisions that I set in the primitive is that so that I can use radial symmetry with the same amount, and that will make things a lot easier and a lot faster. All right, so what I mean by that is 16 now. I won't forget. Where are we? So I'm gonna make sure I have the C-modeler selected, right? So this is the C-modeler, but I'm going to enable radial symmetry by activating symmetry. By the way, for you guys, it will be transform, activate symmetry, and then you can click on this R, which enables radial symmetry. And in the radial count, that's when I'm going to put the 16, or the number that you set in the primitive when you're creating it. So 16. And now the other thing that you have to adjust is, by default, when you enable symmetry, is going to be on the x-axis. Right? So that's what these things refer to, in case you haven't done this before. So it will have 16, but it will be on the x-axis. That means if this is the x-axis, right, you're going to have 16 points around that axis. So it's going to be like that. You have, all the points like that. So we need to find the one that is going to be for the z-axis in this case. Oh, y-axis? No, z-axis. I forgot. Anyway, I'm gonna do it, and if it doesn't work, I'll show you. Whoops. Yes. So y-axis. So the y-axis right? It's the one going up and down. So by enabling this, we now have those 16 points all around. And because we did exactly the same number as the subdivisions when we created this cylinder, then we have exactly 16 points all around. So we can affect every single piece or every single polygon all at once. So essentially what this whole setup, and spending way too much time in this, but it's just so that you guys know what I'm trying to do. Once we have this setup, which we now have, all I have to do is work on this little slice, right? I can create extrusion or add subdivision, not subdivision, sorry, polyloops, that sort of thing. But I only have to concentrate on one single piece, and because I'm using the radial symmetry and we're creating a bottle that has this cylindrical shape, it's gonna work really easy, and it's gonna be quite fast. All right, so you'll see just clicking on that gives me access to all of these points. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is hold the Alt key and tag one single polygroup or one single polygon, and because of the radial symmetry, it does it to all of them. Now I can click, I have the qmesh selected. I'm gonna click and hold shift. I'm gonna push that up, and this is gonna determine kind of like the height of that bottle. Let's add a point here or an edge loop there, and maybe this is gonna be somewhere maybe there. Tag holding Alt, extrude that, maybe holding shift actually, just to add some beveling to that. Let's push this one in a bit. Alt, click and drag, holding shift, tag, extrude that bottle. So that's all right. I'm just gonna make this a little bit bigger just by using the mask. Same thing with this. So this is kind of like I think it needs to be a bit thicker. It's not like a bottle of water. It's kind of like a tall bottle, or like a vase that you can put things in it as well, like the ferns could be in here. That's kind of like the idea, what I'm going for. I'm gonna right click on this edge, click bevel, that, hold shift. So this is a very quick way to produce this type of assets, just by concentrating on one single line basically. I'm gonna, oops, insert a new one here, tag this one, push this one up a bit, and then we can bevel that one, maybe this one again, maybe that one as well. So that creates that sort of not straight bottom of the bottle, which is fine. Let's work on this part as well. So I'm gonna add another edge loop there, another one there, so that when we use the dynamic subdivision, it's gonna be sharper, like this area here. Maybe let's extrude this a tiny bit. There we go. Tag these, and I'm gonna delete this so that we can create thickness. Actually, we might delete this one as well. We'll have to tweak this in just a second. All right, so if I enable dynamic, so have dynamic subdivision enabled, we might need to add a few loops towards the bottom, maybe a couple more in the middle, but that's about it. Oh no. We're struggling here. All right. So now I have the bottle. I'm gonna turn this dynamic off, and I'm gonna assign a single polygroup and use qmesh to basically add thickness. And I'm gonna add the thickness towards the inside of the bottle. So I'm gonna click and push in. So that's gonna give me the thickness, and I'm gonna concentrate here at the bottom, at the top. And I'm just going to, let's see, I'm gonna mask this entire polygroup. So right click on the edge loop, mask the edge loop, not the polygroup, sorry, and click on mask. I'm gonna select edge loop complete. So I'm gonna click on this, and that basically masks this edge. I'm gonna invert that mask, bring in the gizmo, center to the unmasked areas, and I can just round this a little bit more. I have a feeling that the drivers are gonna die on me in just a second, but we'll try to keep it alive. I think they're gone. Brilliant. Okay, I think the tablet is gone, but I can still work with the mouse. We're gonna continue working just with the mouse because of my tablet. But all right, cool. So now I have dynamic again. How can I turned it on again? And we have this bottle. We can increase the subdivision just to soften it. So that's working fine. This is gonna be a glass bottle. And now, if just the only thing that you have to keep in mind is because I extrude everything inwards, is basically inverting or flipping the normals. So I have double enable, which for you guys should be on the display properties. So if I turn double off, you'll see this is all inverted. It's not a big deal. You just need to flip it, and that fixes it. But just need to keep that in mind, that if you're working with single-sided meshes like I did to generate the thickness, yeah, you need to keep that in mind. All right, I think I just want to add kind of like let's go to the dynamic subdivision. I want to add a line here and add one of those. I don't know, I've seen them before. I don't know if they have a name or anything, but they're like half plastic and half wooden. So I'm just going to add a line in there just to make it more stylish. So here, gonna do bevel like this, just a tiny bit of bevel, and I'm gonna use the qmesh, and I'm gonna extrude that in just a tiny bit as well. Oh, that's too much. All right, and also insert couple of edge loops here so that this indentation is quite sharp. Right, so that's kind of like what I'm going for. So everything is going to be kind of like a white plastic or something, or maybe transparent, I don't know. And this bit at the bottom is kind of like the wooden pattern. And I'm just gonna add one more edge loop there. All right, so we have another asset ready to go. This one can be duplicated or replicated. I mean, the same process could be replicated to do something else if you wanna just change things on the fly, because this is a low-res mesh. Actually, let's copy this, go to our tool, paste that. It's quite big. Alright, so that's our bottle. So what I was saying is you can, for example, duplicate this. This is quite low res, and you still have the symmetry. So you can use the move brush, for example, right? And then just do this. So that's just another way to create an interesting shape bottle or a vase, because I'm using symmetry, right? I'm just destroying it, but hopefully you get the idea. I'm gonna turn on dynamic so that I can see better what I'm doing. Just trying to create another bottle that could work well. Just showing you this this approach, kind of like a pear shape. Once you have the base, it should be pretty straightforward. I'm gonna mask this one so that I don't affect them, and just use the smooth brush. All right, and dynamic. There we go. We could potentially just remove. No, it's fine. Just need to tweak this. So it's more like a, yeah, more like a vase. Maybe just to, so it's not exactly like the other one, I'm gonna increase the thickness of this top area. And that's it. You have another bottle because of that, you know, radial symmetry. All right. I'm not sure if I like this border here, so just going to smooth that. A bit more interesting, I guess. All right, so I'm gonna copy that one, also paste it in the scene. So now we have two bottles or vases or whatever. Same technique, different approaches, but so you guys know, you know, have at least different ways to to approach this. All right, so we have the wall, we have the plant. How much time we have? All right, so let me just check the chat, see if there are any questions. Otherwise, we'll create the lamp. That should be pretty straightforward as well. And we arrange the scene, and we'll leave it like that, all set up. All right, all good. No questions so far. So for the lamp, let's do something interesting, maybe something that matches the legs of the table. So for that, I'm gonna bring in, you know what, let's do something a bit more organic. Just had an idea. So let's append a sphere. Polysphere, doesn't matter what it is. All right. And I'm just going to play around, and I don't have my pen, so I'll have to just try to be more more creative in the way that I use the mouse, I guess. Oh, and now one of my my panels is not working. I don't know. Today's been technically a disaster. All right. So I'm just gonna create something kind of like weird and organic. This is gonna be the lamp. I know this is not gonna look great, but just bear with me. I'm pretending to be a designer as well. Yeah. So just gonna go for something more abstract. Okay, and then with the H polish, just gonna try to define some planes. All right, and then clay polish. Just gonna rotate this one around, and maybe from the top using the move brush again. Just do that. So that's kind of like where the cable is gonna be hanging in this lamp. Clay polish again. All right. So what I was thinking is we can take this and we can do a decimation, use this decimation master to just reduce it to very, very simple pieces, and then we do the extrusion of the edges. So let's have a look. Hopefully it's gonna be an interesting shape and give you guys ideas of how to use this technique. All right, decimated. I'm gonna go to decimate current. that's fine, but I need to keep pushing it. 2, maybe 0.5%. There we go. So that's kind of like what I was hoping to get, maybe 0.2. There we go. So this is more the style that I was hoping to get. Fine. And I'm just going to use the move brush to adjust some of these shapes so that the triangles are not as thin in some areas. Like for example this one here. Just going to increase the distance between the triangles. That's kind of like the manual process. This is the bottom of the lamp, so I'm just going to try to simplify it as well. Alright, but now that we have this weird shape, what I'll do is I'll bring the C-model again. Oops. C-model, qmesh, no, not qmesh, inset, each polygon, polygroup all, so I can click and drag, and we do that. And if you want to skip a step and not have to delete those planes, you can use the border only, so that just gives you the border. Right, and then we use the the qmesh, polygroup all, and extrude that. Right, so now we have this weird looking shape, yeah, that we can use. Now I forgot to do something. Let me undo all that. Like, provided that we are going to actually create something that is more realistic, what we can do is actually create a point here where the cable would be, or the how do you call that, where you screw the light bulb. So I'm going to use the split for this point and create something like that, and then just use the move brush to adjust this point before we do the other process. Doesn't have to be perfect because of the the nature of this shape anyway, but you know what I mean. I'm just trying to go for something more realistic here. So I'm gonna delete and delete polygroup. There we go. Now inset. So now we have that hollow area there. Makes more sense. And qmesh, extrude that. Right. So we have this designer lamp ready to go. I'm gonna sell it to IKEA. All right. We can also turn dynamic. Actually, this is actually more interesting now that I look at it. Nah. But you can play around with those things. QGrid. And play with the coverage. So that's the basis of the lamp. Let's go ahead and append a quick cylinder. Whoops, I think it was the other way around. It doesn't matter. Just gonna rotate it around. All right, so the cylinder is going to be where I'll put the light bulb. Let's just keep this one simple. We can activate symmetry, radial symmetry, and this one has, I believe, 32 might be. Was that default? Yep. So there's not a lot of things that I need to do in this one. Just need to give it some shape. And extrude the cable here. No. All right. So I just extrude that a little bit there, and that will create that cable. It's a bit thick, but it's fine. One thing we need to do is probably add some edge loops so it doesn't looks weird when we do dynamic. I'm going to turn on symmetry now. Oh, it's going to be hard to select it. So let's use the slice curve like I showed you before. Slice, and I'm going to slice a couple of edge loops there, and at the top. So that's not really affecting the geometry other than adding polygroups. Dynamic. Let's bring in. Ooh, this is too big. I'm just placing that where it should be. All right, and now the lamp, or the cover of the lamp. Cool. And of course we need a light bulb. I'm just gonna do a simple sphere. It's gonna be one of those frosty light bulbs, so you won't be able to see the filament or anything inside. But actually, let's just give it some actual shape because it's not a sphere. For that, we can use just the move brush with radial symmetry. Again, the more points you add, the simpler it's going to be. There we go. That's all we need, really. We don't need more. Can use dynamic if we wanted to. Turn off symmetry. There we go. Lamp done. Right, we have a designer lamp that looks cool. Quick save. I'll have a look at the chat if you guys have any questions. I'm gonna make this into a folder, call it lamp, and I'm gonna put all of these parts in there, and we are ready to set up the scene. We have all the parts that we need. We have the frame, we have the table, we have the lamp, the bottles, everything is in there. So pretty simple once you break it down into different parts, and it's mostly primitives and working with the similar, nothing too complex actually. But once you put it all together, it kind of like creates a nice little scene that you can turn into a template for a poster, or even to just do assets. And if you want to list them into, I don't know, the assets market somewhere, create these meshes and sell them as a product, I guess, for people to put it together. Obviously, you might want to spend a lot more time cleaning the geometry and everything to make it look actually better and useful for someone else if you're planning to do that. But just want to give you that approach to this. Let's see. RD Multimedia. Pablo, could you show us how to make a chain or two and how it would wrap around a neck of a character? Oof, that's probably it's not that hard. What I would do, if I have time after I arrange this scene, I'll show you, because that's not necessarily within the scope of what I was planning to do with this. but it shouldn't be too hard. Let's just go ahead and arrange this. So I'm going to start. I'm going to set up this in there. Okay. I'm going to click on this button here. Hopefully you guys can see it. Yep. So this one is to lock the camera so I don't move it accidentally. I'm actually going to save this as a tool. Let's call it scene. And then I'm going to save it again with a different name. Let's call it scene ready. And this is the one that I can arrange. So I have two files, one that has all the pieces in the center and another one that's going to have everything ready for the shot. All right, so I'm going to start with the wall and with the wall on the frame and the table. So let's toggle everything off, right? And this as well. So the table is kind of like the one that's going to give us a bit of a sense of the scale for the rest, because tables are pretty much standard in a way. The height, obviously there are different types, but it gives us a sense of what it's going to be like. So I'm going to click on the cog icon, click on transpose set, and that allows me to place these where I want it to. So I'll put this one on the side, maybe around there. I don't want it centered, so that I can play. Actually, I do want it centered in the scene, and we just move the frame maybe. Oops, I need to toggle my camera lock so that I can move this closer to the wall. All right. Let's do the same thing with the frame. Although, actually, we can place the frame afterwards. I don't know. I'm just trying to think what would be the best. Frame transpose set. Something weird happened there. Oh, come on. Again, frame transpose set. All right. So what is going on here? Might be a bug. Yeah, that's weird. Never happened to me before, but I guess it's not a big deal. Just want to make sure this is not as close to the wall. All right, cool. So let's put the plant. Forgot to turn the pebbles into actual geometry, so they're just being reduced as I scale it down. So let's keep it. Let's do that first. So let's go into the plant, go to the pebbles, let's go to the nanomesh, want to mesh. So now they should scale with at the same time that we scale everything else. There we go. Another thing you can do is you can hold the Alt key to reposition that pivot, and that's just gonna make it easier to see where you're placing it. All right, maybe from the top. So there. the bottles, they kind of like I think I know what happened before. I think I had the lock unlocked. That could have been the problem. Just gonna leave the bottle there. Just try to use these elements to sort of frame the frame. This could be actually a slightly larger bottle, so just trying to decide where to place these ones, but I think that's all right. I'll play with those later on if I need to. And the lamp is pretty important. It's gonna give us another focal point. Nope, wasn't that. Just don't want to cover the entire thing, maybe just from the top really. All right, so I think we have all the elements that we need. So I'm gonna do a quick save, and that's it. that's really all there is to this scene. And of course, you know, you can take, like I said, remember the frame has two pieces. It has the actual frame and the glass. So we have the glass and we have the frame. So we can use also, we can toggle the frame off if you don't want to have the glass, and then use these with polypaint or with a texture and just create an alpha or a mask for the frame itself, and that way you can just utilize it to as a template and put anything that you want in there. But other than that, I think we are pretty much done. I'm just gonna play with the, where are we? With the rotation of this fern. Find something a bit more interesting. You know what? I think it was fine like this. Yeah, I think it's fine. If anything, now that we have set up the look of it, we can take the pieces and adjust them for the shot. All right, cool. So I think I'm gonna leave it there, guys. This minimal arrangement of things, and yeah, let me see if you have any questions about this. Comics Legend, where will there be a picture of Sivatoki in the frame? maybe. I haven't got to finish him. I'm swamped with other freelance stuff now, and the new students from the Extra Mile are actually producing a lot of stuff, so I'm trying to keep up with everything. But if I get a chance to finish that character, I will, and I will put it here. That's a good idea. Andres, how does the dynamic subdivision works if I want to render it in a different program? So with the dynamic subdivision, is purely for preview or displaying properties of the subdivision before you apply it. So to export it, all you have to do is apply the dynamic subdivision, which is going to give you the subdivision level. So it's going to increase the amount of resolution or the amount of polygons that you have, but that's all really. So dynamic is like subdividing the mesh, but what the term dynamic stands for is that you can dynamically see how it's going to look before you decide to subdivide it. So you can control in real time, like things like the bevel, the chamfer, the the thickness, not the thickness, sorry, the coverage. But it's like if I want to export these, and let's say the bottle, right? If I want to export these like it looks right now, this is just a preview, so I need to toggle off dynamic. This is what is going to be exported if I don't apply it. So I need to enable it, play around with the settings of the dynamic subdivision, which what it's actually doing is distributing a set of polygroups, or it's not a polygroup, sorry, a set of edge loops in different ways so that it gets more bevel or sharper edges, that sort of thing. And then you apply it, and ultimately it looks exactly the same thing, but now you have 5 subdivision level. And this is how it looks. So you have a lot more resolution, which is fine. And you can undo that. So now I have dynamic. That's the only thing there is. All right. Cool. I'm gonna leave it here, guys, because that's about all the time that we have for today. Hopefully you found these tools and these features that I showed you in today's session useful. I'm gonna try to do a quick render of this just to see what I mean, to show you what I mean about setting it up as a template that it can be reused. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it here, guys, and I'll see you next time. Cool. All right, so I'll see you later. Oh, by the way, if you're interested in the I don't know if I have it with me. So I did a workshop about illustration with ZBrush and Photoshop, like a comic illustration, and I recorded the session. So I'm gonna make them available as a intensive short course. But there's a lot of content, and the people that participated in the workshop are producing some awesome stuff. So based on the feedback that I've got, it's something that I think might be of real use and really helpful for some of you guys that are interested in illustration or comic style illustration with ZBrush and Photoshop. So I'm gonna make them available pretty soon as a short course, like I said, as an intensive course. So if you're interested, keep an eye on that, and if you are part of my email list, you'll get an email letting you know once it's ready and once it's up. Perfect. All right. See you guys. Have a good week. Cheers.